They were interviewed by an independent panel that was chaired by Chief Justice Mandi Samaya. The UN Special Rapporteur of the occupied Palestinian territories, Francisca Albanese, has called for more interfaith dialogues to be held across Europe in order to combat anti-Islam sentiments. She says the Israeli regime is continuing to use religion to justify its occupation and gross human rights violations in Gaza and in the West Bank. She was speaking during a critical dialogue held at the University of the Western Cape. Dialogue was hosted by the Directorate of the University in partnership with the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the Desmond Tutu Center for Religion and Social Justice. Recapping on your top stories, scattered protests have broken out in parts of Tanzania today as the country holds a general election marked by the absence of major opposition candidates. Now, for any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, former Bafana player believes PSL players are overpriced, while Paris Saint-Germain post record turnover for Champions League winning campaign. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Senegal. A good afternoon to you, Kenya, Lesotho, Egypt, Sudan. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This is where you get the African perspective. It's where we meet to look at the latest in news, sport and business. This afternoon on our agenda, we'll be taking a look at some developments around Nigeria's Federal Inland Revenue Service. They've issued a directive to various stakeholders, including banks and stockbrokers, to withhold 10% of the tax on interest earned from investments in short-term securities. We'll find out the reasoning and logic behind this. Also, Ethiopia, good news for them. They've had their country's foreign debt plunging from 23 billion to 4.5 billion in a matter of 6 years. Great news as far as the economy is concerned and their economic independence. Looking forward to hearing from you on various social media platforms. On X, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1, as well as on Instagram and on YouTube. But on Facebook, you'll find us at Channel Africa. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. This is Africa in Business.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 7 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. We begin here this afternoon as Johannesburg strives to cement its status as a world-class African city. Delegates at the 2025 City Power Energy Indaba say innovation in energy technologies as well as climate adaptation are key to driving a just and inclusive energy transition for all of the residents. Held under the theme Powering Johannesburg's Sustainable Future, our economics reporter, Innocent Samosa, has more from the Indaba, which is currently underway in Johannesburg. All right, we'll try and bring you that story a little bit later on this afternoon. Still coming up for you at about 4:40 today, we'll be looking at a Pan-African renewable energy company, Granville Energy. They've signed a deal with the United States worth $1.1 billion. We'll take a look at that story. And as we do as well, we'll be hosting APSA as we look at the latest developments in the markets. And we'll be looking at mining companies. They've released their Q3 production update, and we'll be taking a look at some of the key highlights and the results coming out of that, as well as the Fed. They expected to cut the interest rate by 25 basis points today. We'll find out what exactly is driving that decision. Do stay with us.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
As Johannesburg works to secure a stable and reliable power supply, City Power contributes nearly $440 million to the city's economy each year. Energy expert Professor Vali Padiachi shares some concrete steps that City Power should take to modernize Johannesburg's electricity grid and ensure energy security amid growing demand and frequent power disruptions.
Well, there are various steps that can be taken, but I think the core step is obviously to get new generation, so new electrons. I think we're getting there, albeit it's a bit slow, because that value chain of getting big projects to close takes a lot of time, okay? But we're getting there. Then, of course, on the other side, if you can't get lots of electrons on the grid, then you need to save. So energy efficiency would be also significant. But then you can get all the generation of electrons, but if you can't transport it from the generator to the customer, then you're wasting your time.
It is believed that almost half of the $440 million stems directly from projects that strengthen energy security and grid resilience. But how can City Power ensure that local communities are fully included in the just energy transition? Professor Padiachi explains.
I'm glad you asked that question, because all of these initiatives I'm talking about would involve collaboration with the community. And from my experience, if you do not bring the community into the project value chain, then those projects don't succeed.
Meanwhile, Bertha Dlamini, founding president of African Women in Energy and Power, emphasizes that the continent has the duty to educate communities on the just energy transition.
The whole continent has a responsibility to educate communities on the meaning of a just energy transition. Not only the just element which talks about inclusion and equity, but the transition into clean, accessible and affordable energy, the construct of the value chain so that communities, number one, are able to advocate for the projects that are beneficial for their environment. Now, that's number one. Number two, communities are able to identify opportunities for citizens within their jurisdictions.
Bertha added that communities play a crucial role in shaping how just energy policies are developed.
In addition, as countries design just energy transition policies, communities play a pivotal role in directing how those policies are designed so that as communities, they are not left behind the economic opportunities that are brought about.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
That's Innocent Simosa there reporting from the City Power Energy Indaba. The entire theme this year, powering Johannesburg's sustainable future.
AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at AUSISA on social media. AUSISA, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation, Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 13 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our focus now on Nigeria, where the country's Federal Inland Revenue Service has directed banks, stockbrokers, as well as other financial institutions to deduct a 10% withholding tax on interest earned from investments in short-term securities. Now, the new directive requires tax to be deducted at the point of payment on instruments such as treasury bills, corporate bonds, promissory notes, as well as bills of exchange. Prior to this directive, short-term bills were tax exempt, and this was done in order to boost returns for investors. Helping us understand the rationale behind this new directive is Dennis O'Shea, a certified financial modeling and valuation analyst. Good to have you with us once again. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Thami. It's always a pleasure to be on the program.
So let's start with an understanding of what the rationale behind the Nigerian government imposing this 10% withholding tax on interest.
The rationale, definitely the answer is going to be revenue generation, because now the country is looking super well. If you remember the last time we spoke, I gave you that there are cycles that are in the country that you must look at economically, and now the government, they know that, and they're taking advantage of that cycle, and Nigeria is in a very good cycle right now economically, so they're taking advantage of that to boost revenue generation for the country, which is one of the primary rationale to broaden the tax base and increase non-oil revenue for the country.
And what impact is this likely to have, specifically on domestic investors and the short-term securities market where this directive is targeted?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a double-edged sword, right? As much as they're trying to generate revenue for the country, at the same time, it's going to be an issue also for the country, because now you are not friendly to investors who want to take advantage of the economy's prosperity at this cycle and then get short-term revenue before the next cycle starts in January. So there are people that are taking advantage of the October, November, December short-term cycle to take a lot of profits from their short-term investments. And before the next cycle, they don't know what policy is going to be implemented. So now they're trying to reduce the amount of investment that will come in. But it's also good for the government, because the government is trying to reduce the risk, because anytime the government tries to reduce short-term investment and then prioritize long-term investment, it reduces the risk that the government carries on. So it's a double-edged sword.
And it is all about risk, Dennis, as you say. Yes, indeed, this is a measure to try and generate revenue. But could there have been other methods or perhaps other strategies that the federal government could have put in place in order to try and boost revenue? And I ask this because does this move outweigh the risks of the possible lack of investment in short-term instruments because of these changes?
Yes, you're very correct. Like we've had these conversations before, the issue that North African economies have and North African nations have is that there is no long-term planning, economic planning, and we see that a lot. With, for example, recently China is celebrating a 15th year of implementing 5-year consecutive terms. That is 75 years of planning every 5 years. And with that, they have foresight, they have insight, they have hindsight, they have several other models that they can run economically. And we don't see that in Africa. And this is one of the things that will happen to African countries if we don't have economic models that are being projected just the way we see China is. So the earlier they can implement these models that will project into the future, the better they can accommodate either short-term or long-term investors. Because it doesn't really make sense. Also, they can explore other forms of revenue generation. Oil is more than enough. Nigeria has one of the largest reserves of oil in the world. Some are comparing it to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, but they are not confirmed yet. But it is believed that that can cover more than enough. So, yeah.
All right, Dennis O'Shea,
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you very much for that update. Some sweeping developments there as far as the withholding of tax on short-term securities. Thank you, Dennis.
Having me, well appreciated.
Very much so. That's Dennis O'Shea, is a certified financial model and valuation analyst.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
From Nigeria to Ethiopia now, where the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has declared that the nation's foreign debt has plunged from $23 billion to $4.5 billion. And this in a period of just 6 years, a figure that he says marks a new era of economic independence for Ethiopia. Addressing Parliament, Abiy credited his government's homegrown economic reform program for repairing fiscal imbalances, boosting domestic revenue, as well as reducing inflation to its lowest level in years. Yet some analysts remain cautious that many Ethiopians continue to grapple with high food and housing costs, raising questions about whether the government's reforms are indeed translating into tangible gains for the ordinary Ethiopian. To speak to us about this, we're joined this afternoon by Francis Kipkurui-Sang, an economist based in neighbouring Kenya. A very good afternoon to you, so welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for welcoming me.
So the Prime Minister claims that Ethiopia's foreign debt has dropped by nearly 80% since the year 2018. How plausible is such a sharp reduction? Because it is indeed a very steep one. And what are the mechanisms that could be behind this?
Okay, first and foremost, we have to look at the data, maybe the World Bank or IMF data, in order to be sure that it has dropped by 80%. But what we can look at is that there are efforts mainly to restructure, not mainly as a result of the Ethiopian economy performing very strong and then being able to repay these debts. But there have been two restructuring efforts of the debts. One was an official creditor deal that where Ethiopia reached an agreement with some of its lenders, China and the Paris Club members, where there's a $3.5 billion relief through deferrals and maturity extensions. And another one, there was an IMF restructure that was done, where $3.4 billion financing package for Ethiopia was done by IMF with the World Bank, in which a prerequisite debt restructuring under the G20's common framework. So this debt restructuring, because there's also news that there is a disagreement with bondholders, people who hold Ethiopia's sovereign bond, because of this exercise of restructuring. Now, it may be true, but it's mainly as a result of restructuring, not necessarily that Ethiopia has managed to pay its debts.
So is this then a legitimate reflection of the country's status as far as foreign debt is concerned, or is it more a case of playing musical chairs?
It might be. That's why I said that we can't agree with that statement holistically unless we look at the data from sources that can be approved. Because you see, such statement, it's a very good statement. It's a very good statement. But when you look at the most recent, the sustainability analysis that was done jointly by World Bank and IMF, it was putting a bleak status on the current situation of Ethiopia, also when it comes to debt and its capability to pay debts, despite the challenges that the country is facing. Looking at, for example, the Tigray conflict, and they were bunching debt services in the near to medium term was adverse. Right. So we can't really agree with that statement unless we look at the data.
So let's move from the issue of of foreign debt to government revenue. That is reported to have risen from $1.1 billion to $6.5 billion in the same period, which is that 6-year period. Is that legitimate? And what are the structural or policy changes that would be required in order to achieve such rapid growth in domestic revenue?
Okay, Ethiopia has been putting strategic efforts to increase the homegrown economic reform program. And mainly it's on agriculture, because Ethiopia largely it's an agricultural-based country in terms of its output and also its export. But also we cannot put to the side and forget about the effects of inflation, because the increase, yes, is partly due to reform-driven, which follows the launch of government's reform program in 2019, which aimed to repair macroeconomic imbalances and strengthen the revenue generation. And also IMF and other bodies have recognized Ethiopia's tax revenue potential, which is still low, which they're also trying to look at to improve, but which is difficult because it's mainly agricultural and you don't really tax agriculture in Africa like it's done. But also the increase is also because of inflation over those 6 years, because there's been a price increase in products and also government services, and that has led to the rise in this inflation. So we have to analyze what the real figure is, the real revenue growth because of economic performance other than inflation.
Right. So as we wrap up our conversation this afternoon, we've touched on the issue of foreign debt, we've looked at the government revenue, we've spoken about inflation as well. How would you rate the performance or the results of the homegrown economic reform program? Are there signs, is there evidence that the policies put in place have indeed strengthened the country's economic fundamentals or even, the private sector resilience?
Yes, there is significant indicators which can show, but now we look at these indicators in broad terms. For example, in agriculture, there's an increase in output, although inflation still remains a concern. Then there is the issue. If you look at the dam, the Ethiopian reconnaissance dam, the Jad dam, that is expected to more than doubles Ethiopia's electricity production. It's also expected to boost industry and also exports in terms of exporting this electricity to neighboring countries, let's say in East Africa, for example, like Kenya, where we have a shortage of electricity, where we have to use generators, and also to boost industry, because if they have this dam, then the electricity prices can go low, and when the cost of energy goes low, then it boosts production, industrial production, which might also spur the economy and lead to an export. So there is potential, but in the past 6 years, there is, I don't think that there is no magic that has happened to really boost the economic performance as the Prime Minister.
Okay, we'll leave it at that, Francis. Thank you for that summary. So potential, but not quite as impressive as reported. As you say, we need to get into the details and get really granular about those reports and what it is that accounts for them. Francis Kipkuri-Sang, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
You're welcome.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you. He's an economist based in Kenya, taking us to 27 minutes after 4.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et votre 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine. Annika Longi. sur Channel Africa.
Comment est-ce que les militants et sympathisants du parti, les transformateurs, ont-ils réagi face à la condamnation de Succès Masra?
La condamnation de Succès Masra ne nous a pas surpris et les militants transformateurs ont été bouleversés et indignés étant donné que le verdict est un verdict lourd, illégal, injuste et donc face à la répression dans laquelle le peuple tchadien est confronté, les militants transformateurs se sont résignés de ne pouvoir pas sortir manifester et donc c'est une situation totalement absurde pour un pays. Et aujourd'hui nous célébrons le 11 août, fête de l'indépendance. On pensait que le verdict allait être plus ou moins clément, mais le verdict est sévère.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
It is exactly 29 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. I'm quite interested to find out if you are in Nigeria and are a business person in Nigeria and your focus as far as investments are concerned is within the space of short-term, or in the area rather, of short-term securities. How is Nigeria's Federal Inland Revenue Directive, the latest one, saying that 10% withholding tax on interest earned from these investments needs to be imposed now? Is that going to impact how you invest and where you actually are going to be placing your finances as far as investments are concerned? Does it matter to you, or will you remain bullish as far as looking at those short-term securities? And if you are in Ethiopia, we've been looking back over the past 6 years and the impact that the economic reform policy, the economic reform program has had on the country. Sterling results reported by Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. But as we heard from the economist based in Kenya, Francis Kipkuri Sang, a lot of that really sounds like musical chairs if you're going to be going really granular and analyzing whether there has been a reduction in foreign debt. Because as he's saying, it's not that the debt has been paid, but merely the debt has been restructured. And as far as inflation is concerned, that is said to have fallen to 11.7%. And yet the reality in Ethiopia is that many are still facing very high food prices. The rental is still very high. What is your lived experience? Let us know. On X, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa. Instagram as well as YouTube, we are at Channel Africa. It's gone exactly 4:30 Central African time. Let's head over now to the markets desk, where Buntle Hedbush is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Thami. Good afternoon. In our final look at the indicators this afternoon, $1 is trading at 17 Rand 20 in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13 Bula 76. In Namibia, it's at 17 Namibian dollars 20. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 21 kwacha 95 this afternoon. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 37. In Ethiopia, 151 birr 30. Uganda, 3,457 shilling, and in Tanzania it's at 2,452 shilling. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,456 naira this afternoon. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 47 Egyptian pound 35. Tunisia at 2 dinar 90. In Algeria, it's at 129 dinar and 3. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 19. In Angola, it's trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,203 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,008 per ounce this afternoon. It's breached that $4,000 mark once again. Platinum at $1,571 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $64.66 a barrel. And those are your indicators. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And let's head over now to the sports desk, where Musibudi Makura is standing by with your latest from the business of sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. So Lance Davids, former Bafana midfielder, believes one of the key reasons why the PSL players are struggling to secure moves abroad is because they are often overpriced. Now, as an agent based in Belgium, the 40-year-old says he is confident the current generation, especially those heading to the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in December, as well as next year's FIFA World Cup, will attract strong interest from clubs abroad. Davids also cautioned that South African clubs must be more realistic in how they evaluate their players if those opportunities are to materialize.
I think the clubs are overvaluing our players. That's their value, that's what they think, and they're entitled to do it. But I always say European team, will not pay a lot for an African player that's based in Africa. They will pay for an African player that's already based in Europe, they will go top dollar. But a player playing in Africa, or just a league that they don't think it's a top league, in their opinion, they're not going to pay the top dollar. So I always say the team should always look not at the first deal, but look more at the second deal. That will be my advice. But again, that's not for me to say.
Davids also adds that a mixture of good salaries in the PSL and a lack of drive is another factor for the decline in players leaving South Africa.
You know, some of these players that are playing at the big clubs, they are earning more money than they could earn in Europe. So of course I'm taking out the best 5 leagues, but I'm talking about the Scandinavian league. So listen, I'm saying most of them can be playing there, but I'm just saying I won't say it's comfort zone, but Europe is I would say it's another market, and it is difficult to acclimatize if you're not ready for it mentally. I know there's a lot of people that's asking, but why can't we be there? These guys got all contracts. It's not easy.
On to this now. Reigning European champions Paris Saint-Germain on Tuesday reported a turnover at a record high of $997 million last season, despite concerns that the size of their stadium is holding them back. So in a statement announcing the annual financial results, Qatar-owned PSG called 2024-2025, in which they won the Champions League for the very first time, a historic season on both sporting as well as economic fronts. The club, which also was bought by Qatar Sports Investment QSI back in 2011, said commercial revenue alone reached $427 million, while match day income, including ticket sales as well as hospitality, at $375 million. So total turnover was slightly up from $937 million in the previous campaign, when Real Madrid became the first club to generate $1 billion in revenue in a single season. So PSG were third in the Deloitte Football Money League ranking of the financial might of clubs of the 2023-2024 campaign. This behind only Madrid as well as Manchester City, with the latter's revenue then reaching $973 million. Now, this performance shows the maturity of the project since the arrival of its main shareholder QSI, and also confirms the solidity of the club's economic model, now among the most successful in the world. So since QSI's initial acquisition back in 2011, Paris Saint-Germain's valuation and interest from investors has experienced exponential growth, reflecting the club's transformation into one of the most valuable and influential sports brands in the world. The amount spent on player salaries has also dramatically decreased following the departures of superstars like Kylian Mbappe, Neymar, as well as Lionel Messi in 2023 and in 2024. And PSG says the percentage of turnover spent on wages had gone down from 111% to below 65%. And finally, leading global tire manufacturer Hankook Tire, as well as the TLG, have presented by SoFi. The Primetime Team Golf League announced a new multi-year sponsorship that names Hankook Tire the first official tire partner, as well as the latest founding partner of TGL. Now, the new partnership, negotiated by ANC, a leading sports as well as entertainment agency, includes several co-branded integrations across sport broadcast and in venue new displays. It will launch as part of the TLG's second season, which begins on the 28th of December. And ANC, the league's broadcast debut, will also take place on the 28th of December. So TGL is the first tech-driven golf league that is designed to reimagine the sport for a new generation. The partnership will run for 3 years until the 30th of September 2028. Well, that is a wrap from the sports desk at the SAWA. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
Thank you to Buntle Headbush and Mosibudi Makura. They take us to exactly 4:39 Central African time. This is Africa in Business. Thank you for staying with us. Now, a Pan-African renewable energy company, Granville Energy, has signed a $1.1 billion memorandum of understanding. This is with Mainstream Energy Solutions Limited, and together they hope to develop Africa's first GW floating solar power plant at Kayenji Dam. That's a 1 gigawatt floating solar power plant at Kayenji Dam in Nigeria. It's termed the continent's largest and most ambitious renewable projects to date. This facility will be in, obviously, sub-Saharan Africa, and the floating solar facility aims to strengthen regional energy security. It hopes to drive industrialization and also create thousands of jobs through local manufacturing of solar components. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Thami, the CEO of Granville Energy. A very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami, and nice to be with you again.
Great. Now, this is quite a fascinating one. Can you tell us more about this floating solar power plant at Kayenji Dam and the partnership as well between Granville Energy and Mainstream Energy Solutions? What does this partnership represent for the renewable energy future of the continent?
Absolutely, Thami. We are very excited as Granville to partner with Mainstream Energy Solutions Limited, Nigeria, to build this ambitious project. To put things into perspective, Kayenji Dam, at commission in 1968, had a capacity of about 760 megawatts. And we are going to develop almost 25% more capacity than its original size. And there's enough space on the lake created from the dam that we can build this capacity. For Nigeria, obviously, it's a major addition to the national grid capacity. But also for West Africa, we can add hugely needed electricity capacity to the West Africa power port and create more jobs for the countries.
We're quite used to the traditional solar farms. How does a hybrid solar hydro model work in comparison to the traditional ones?
Okay, so the traditional solar power plant, we would need a large piece of land. In this case, for 1 gigawatt, we would need about 13 to 20 square kilometers of space. So if we were to use a typical solar power plant, that's the space we would need to construct the multi-structure to install the panels and feed into the grid. In the case of a hybrid solar and hydro power plant, we use the surface area of the dam or the lake created by the dam, the reservoir, where we use floats designed specifically for this water body to install the solar panels, and then we feed the grid, the electricity into the grid at the point of interconnection with the hydropower plant. So see it as two different generation mechanisms working in tandem, feeding electricity at the same time into the grid. The excess power the power we generate gets into kind of feeding point into the national
Tabi, I do apologize. Our connection, they're really not the best. I'm hearing every second word. I am going to ask our producer, Mabo, to try and get hold of you again on a better line as we continue this conversation. But really fascinating how this, hybrid solar model is going to work. It's a solar hydro model. We're used to having traditional solar farms on pieces of land. But now he says you actually need less water surface in order to be able to generate this solar power. And when we get him back again, we'll also talk about how this project is going to be, impacting the continent's decarbonization targets. We also know of the Africa Union's Agenda 2063 goals for sustainable inclusive growth, and whether this particular hybrid model is going to assist in the achievement of those goals. It's gone exactly 4:43 Central African time. Do stay with us. Thami, the CEO of Granville Energy, back with us once again. You were still describing this really fascinating process of how this hybrid solar model works. Please go ahead.
Yes, Thami. So I was saying that visualize this as two different generation mechanisms working in tandem with each other. So the hydropower plant generates electricity from the force of water that runs through the turbine, and the solar panels generate electricity from solar radiation on the panel, and both of them feed in electricity to the grid at the same point of interconnection. So basically augmenting the capacity.
Augmented capacity. It seems to get better and better as you go along. I was just saying to our listeners on the continent that this is the type of project that directly supports the continent's decarbonization targets. What is it that drives your vision for Africa's clean energy transformation? All of this, obviously, with the African Union's Agenda 2063 in mind.
Very interesting point, Thami. Number one is economic development. We cannot develop our economies. We cannot grow the economies at the rate at which we want without a stable and affordable electricity supply. Energy is key. Without energy, we have no economic activity. Secondly, it's obviously climate change. Africa is the least contributor to carbon emission in the world, yet we are going to face the greatest impact. So this is part of us contributing to the global decarbonization process and using our natural resources in abundance, obviously sunlight, to contribute to the decarbonization process. And obviously at the same time, bring the badly needed skills in advanced technologies such as advanced manufacturing, engineering, and science.
I wonder though, as I let you go, Tabiti, how much of these solar components are going to be imported into the continent, or is there a really strong local manufacturing component?
Well, we have a sister company that is involved in manufacturing, and obviously we will support local manufacturers in Nigeria and around Africa. Part of doing this project is to drive local manufacturing, so we'll act as a catalyst to support local content.
All right, well, thank you so much.
At least about 60 to 70% of the content will come from the continent.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that update and wishing you all of the best. This MOU now signed, and we'll be keeping abreast of developments on that front.
Thanks, Thami.
All right, thanks. That's Thami, the CEO of Granville Energy. He takes us to exactly 4:46 Central African time. In just a moment, we'll turn our sights on to Luanda.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Bina l'Export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine. Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:48 Central African Time. Now, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, ouder NEPAD, in collaboration with the government of Angola, is hosting the third Luanda Financing Summit for Africa's infrastructure development. Now, infrastructure development is key to Africa's growth, its development, as well as prosperity. It's an area that we continue to focus on right here on Africa in Business. However, the continent still faces a significant financing gap. This gap needs to be bridged if we are to realize the African Union's Agenda 2063 vision of world-class infrastructure that connects the continent by road, by rail, air, power networks, as well as digital links. To speak to us about this, we're joined this afternoon by Zipporah Maubane, ouder NEPAD's Head of Communications and Advocacy. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us.
So how is the continent doing in terms of getting the necessary development financing that's needed?
As you said, this is the third Luanda Financing for Infrastructure Development in Africa. So here we are now having the opportunity to engage with investors and financial institutions. This process is driven by ourselves as ouder NEPAD, to the African Union, and the government of Angola, who are hosting us. So at this summit, we are able to now look at the fact that this is the third summit. What has happened in the previous summits? We are able to give a report back. But what is crucial is that we have identified key infrastructure projects that will help Africa advance to the next level of development. And these key projects are now being presented today and tomorrow to potential investors. These are projects that are in energy, projects in ICT, projects in water, and really these projects that are looking to drive integration, interconnectivity of this continent so that really it's easy for goods and services and technology, and people, particularly young people, to be able for them to move across the continent. So we have a $3 trillion deficit in terms of investment into the infrastructure that we know will take Africa to the vision of 2063, as you mentioned earlier, of a world-class infrastructure. So we are having conversations today. Since yesterday, we started this summit. And yes.
Sorry, I wanted to ask you this. I mean, you've mentioned the various sectors and the projects that are going to be presented there. And if you could just comment on this, that it doesn't seem like there's a deficit of creativity, it doesn't seem like there's a deficit of projects that are there to be funded to try and bridge this gap. But despite that, there are still barriers that are preventing the closing of this financing gap. Where are the blind spots? Why is it that the innovative projects that are being put forward and the innovations are not quite, meeting those financing needs?
Right. So we are looking at addressing different financing models of infrastructure in the continent. The finance of infrastructure that currently is in play does not serve the needs or the pace at which the pace of the development we want. So we are proposing a really dynamic kind of financing model to be considered by the likes of Development Bank of South Africa or African Development Bank and other mainstream banks as well, and how government, the notion of peace, how that can come into play to really ensure the development of infrastructure is fast-tracked. So the financing model is number one. And number two, infrastructure is very, very expensive to put in place. So some of the countries in the continent really need investment partners to really assist with seeing through the level of infrastructure that's required for their countries. But the good thing is that we are looking at infrastructure projects that are enabling economic activity and connectivity in not just one country, but maybe 3 or 4 countries at a time. And we've seen that with a bridge that connects Zambia and Botswana that has been completed. And actually, it has opened so much economic activity. And that ripple effect flows into South Africa and Namibia and Zimbabwe. So those are the kind of infrastructure that we're looking at.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Zipporah, for that. We'll leave it on that really positive note of, one project that is actually working, creating that connectivity between various countries on the African continent and also creating jobs. We wish you all of the best for the 3rd Luanda Financing Summit. Thank you for your time, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Zipporah Mawane, Auda, NEPAD's Head of Communications and Advocacy, bring us to exactly 4:54 Central African Time.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:54 Central African Time. As we wrap up Africa in Business this afternoon, we'll have a conversation with Lindile Malchas. Lindile Malchas is the investment strategist at Absa Investments. And this afternoon, as we usually do, we'll take a look at the performances of both global and local markets. We'll take a look at the Q3 production update that was released by mining companies and some of the highlights that came out of those results. And also the Fed. They're expected to cut interest rates by 25 basis points today. We'll take a look at that as well as the factors driving that decision to cut the interest rate by those 25 basis points. Lindile Malchas, good to have you with us. Welcome once again.
Afternoon, Thami, and good afternoon to the listeners.
So let's dive straight into it as we look at the performances of both local and global markets. What is your overview for today?
Yes, so markets are slightly mixed currently. So we are seeing in the US markets opening in the green. In the Europe, slightly mixed, seeing the UK FTSE 100 down, Stocks 50 being flat, and then Asian markets also a bit mixed with some of the Chinese indices up and then Japanese markets coming under a bit of pressure. Locally, the all share has returned to green, so it's mainly been driven by resources. Those are up in excess of 3% today. And then we are seeing what is struggling has been on the financial side, and then the industrials also coming in more or less flat. And then we are seeing a bit of weakness in the dollar today ahead of the US Fed interest rate decision after it has been strengthening over the past week. And it has meant that the Rand has clawed back some of the losses that we were seeing, currently trading around 17 Rand 10 cents to the dollar, and also seeing some of the commodity prices recovering from the declines that we saw in the past week.
Let's talk about the Fed. The Fed's expected to cut interest rates by 25 basis points today. What is driving that decision?
Yes, so markets are expecting a 25 basis points cut today, and also anticipating another 25 basis points cut in December at the last meeting. And we think some of the factors that are supporting this view from markets are inflation remaining within expectations. So if you look at the last figure, that certainly did not see any dramatic uptick and staying in line with what markets had expected. We have been seeing since the start of the year as well that the labor market has been softening in the US. So those are some of the factors that the Fed traditionally looks at, and that's what's supporting this further cuts in the interest rates as well.
Let's take a look at the performances of mining companies. They've released their Q3 production updates. What are the key takeaways that stood out for you, some of the highlights that you'd like to focus on?
Yes, so Thami, mining companies have been performing phenomenally well since the start of the year from a share price perspective, particularly the gold and the platinum counters. But we are seeing that some of them are struggling from a production point of view. So looking at platinum, Valterra Platinum, that also being in excess of 100% in terms of share price performance. But looking at the operations, they have been seeing a few challenges. So most recently, they had a fatality that they recorded at the mine, and also saw a decline within the PGM production, so that falling by about 2%. Then looking at the diversified miners, so your likes of your Anglo-American, also seeing a bit of mixed results. In terms of the copper and diamond production, that did perform quite well. Copper production up by about 1%, but you are seeing them struggling with their iron ore production, so that falling by about 9%. And then look at another a miner within the iron ore space, which is Kumba Iron Ore, that also saw a 2% decline within production at one of their mines, which is the Sishen iron ore mine. So quite a lot of declines that we are seeing being recorded in the production updates, but I think it's in line with what we've been seeing from a mining production point of view and the momentum that it's been carrying for the past quarter, where it has been under a bit of pressure as well.
Lyndon Malchus, always a pleasure. Thank you for taking us through the latest business and financial market developments on this Wednesday afternoon.
Thanks, Thami.
Thank you. That's Lyndon Malchus, investment strategist at ABSA Investments. You have yourself a splendid evening further. It is exactly 1 minute to 5 p.m. as we bid you farewell as African Business and say bonjour.
Bonjour Thami.
Vue d'Afrique.
Bonjour à tous les auditeurs. Alors sur Vue d'Afrique aujourd'hui, il sera question du Cameroun, du décompte des voix en Tanzanie et du gouvernement congolais qui salue la nomination d'une commission d'enquête de l'ONU. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. And that's how we as African Business bid you farewell for today. Do rester connecté as Vue d'Afrique comes up now with Les Joël. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the team, you have yourself a splendid evening further. Goodbye.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h, temps universel. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Bonjour à tous et bienvenue sur Canal Afrique, la perspective africaine de l'information qui émet depuis nos studios d'Auckland Park en Afrique du Sud. Kato est à la mise en onde de cette édition de Vue d'Afrique, dont voici sans tarder les grandes lignes. Au Cameroun, la communauté internationale appelle à un dialogue entre les forces en présence pour mettre fin aux violences consécutives à la réélection du président Paul Biya. Nous parlerons du décompte des voix en cours en Tanzanie à l'issue de la présidentielle de ce mercredi, dont la sortante Samia Suluhu Hassan part largement favorite en l'absence de deux principaux candidats de l'opposition.